We're talking about aim of today is actually just give us some insight into the world of communications and the skill of negotiation. Now, what we have to remember is the world's changing. How we do face-to-face online, how we communicate online, those are all really important. And hopefully we can cover some tools and techniques here. The outcome here for me is actually important, is that you don't just sit here passively listening and going, oh, that's really interesting, and then walk away and do nothing with it. I'd encourage you to make some notes and say that you are going to change a few things if you can. Okay, and implement. And it's okay to make mistakes. Okay, I'm a big fan of making mistakes. Why? If you make a mistake, it means you are trying. If you're not making a mistake, you're either brilliant at it or you are not trying at all. Okay, so which is what most people do. And then who's this for? Well, this is for anyone. And, you know, we talk about whether people are in business or not. It really doesn't matter. We communicate all day long and we negotiate all day long. So it's important for most people. So who am I? My name's Ivan Vickers. I'm a business coach. I've been doing this since 2004 when I founded my company. I'm a strategist, I'm a consultant, I'm an author, I speak. You can all read the rest. Probably my biggest accolade today is I'm a dad. That is such a huge thing. For those people that have worked with me, they know that I have two wonderful words that I use all the time, and they are clarity. That means getting crystal clear on what you're looking for, and the word and. Most people live in a world today where they say, I can do this or this. I'm saying, well, if you change it to and, can I do this and this? Then you have new possibilities, and new possibilities and new ideas, and innovation is what changes the world. Okay, so we all know what this picture means. So COVID has been around for a while. It's introduced some new words into our language, you know, like social distancing, wearing a mask, the 2-meter rule, Zoom. Who knew about Zoom before COVID? So it's introduced quite a few things. It's also challenged our world economically and changed the rules. You know, for a lot of people, they've been tucked up at home or tucked up in a place somewhere. And they've had to find places to communicate. You know, communication changed, and it changed in a heartbeat, pretty much. And some, you know, I feel for people that are having a tough time, but you know, all we can do is reach out, communicate, show that we care, and hopefully we can make a difference that way. And I think, just in passing, I think it's also important to realize that this will pass. Okay. The world has come through huge events. You know, one, I can think of one in the fairly near term, which was the end of the Second World War. That affected the entire world, you know, and we came out of it. So there's hope on the horizon. Never lose it. Never lose hope. So with that said, let's jump straight in. So communication. It's an interesting word. We could go, I'd encourage you to look up what does communication mean. But here's a quick challenge for you, and I'll just ask you to pop in the chat maybe. What for you is the definition of communication? And I would like you just to pop it down, just in a sentence. Yeah. So I'm going to give you a minute. If you can, just pop it in the chat, and then we'll go from there. I've lost my chat. Where's my chat gone? Oops. Relaying a message to everyone effectively. That's not bad. Interaction with other people. Exchanging information. Transference of information. Okay. Communication is a skill to share ideas. Brilliant. Communication is able to exchange ideas, okay, verbally and non-verbally. Wonderful. The two-way process of conveying a message. That's very good. Safia, Harry, okay, yep. The ability to translate an idea from yourself to another individual through various techniques, really good. And Junaid, the ability to get your message across. Awesome. And how are you, Junaid? Cool.
I'm
All
good,
right.
thank you. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I'm good. We'll speak later. So moving on. Oh, come on, technology. Drop me in it. There we go. Cool. So here's a definition I came across, which really spoke to me, and it's the effective communication, because it has to be effective. Okay, is a two-way process of conveying the right message to the right person at the right time, which produces an intended or desired result. Okay, that's it in a nutshell. So it's being understood by the other party. So hopefully, and as we can see from this particular presentation, the whole purpose here is to convey the definition or the what is communication, and hopefully the result it produces is that you have it and are able to do it far more effectively. So what we have to remember is communication is a series of experiences, and we get them through things like hearing or seeing, sometimes smell, sometimes touch, sometimes taste, thought, and there's a whole bunch more. You know, but why do we have to communicate? Well, we want to communicate ideas, we want to communicate thoughts, feelings, emotions, you know, and we do this in a variety of manners. But why do we do it? Well, we do it either to change behavior, to get some kind of action out of someone or something, to ensure that there's understanding so we can all walk down the road together, to persuade people to your way of thinking, or just to get information out there or to give information. So it's really important that we understand that when we talk about communication, that there is a multitude of different goals as to why we are communicating. And most common ways we communicate, okay, and I know we live in an electronic age, but funny thing is, what are we doing right now? We're busy speaking, and I'm busy using visual imagery to get a message across. And if you see up in the top corner, if you have me on camera or whatever you call it, then you will see that I'm using hand gestures and stuff like that, and body language and tone of voice and all of those things. And then we also communicate via writing. Now, we'll talk about the various mechanisms that work a little bit later. But it is important, you know, as we can see, the way we communicate, people make it very complex. It's actually quite simple, okay? And to communicate effectively means that we need to get other people to understand, we need to solve differences, we need to build trust, yeah? And more often than not, our message actually gets misunderstood, or we receive just a part of information, but we don't do anything with it, or we think somebody said something, we don't question it, and we take that as the truth, only to find out later that it wasn't quite right. And we also need to remember that effective communication helps us connect with people, you know, important people like children, like your spouse, like your friends, like your lecturer, like your clients, like people in your network. There's various different places, but it's about connection, human connection. And it also helps us make decisions, okay? You guys made the decision based on something you saw or something somebody said to you to come on this call. And it's great, I'm glad you're here, all 24 of you, awesome. So, but it's really good that you are here, because there are a lot of people who said they were going to be, but aren't. Now, is that lost communication? Or something got lost in the way, or they've decided something else is more important? That's why they're not here. If we go and we look at a model of communication, so this is a very simple model, and communication, you can simplify all communication down to this model. There's always a transmitter or a sender, the guy with the tie, and there's always a receiver, the young lady with the jacket. Yeah. Now, there's a whole bunch of stuff in between. So the guy is actually sending a message. Yeah. So he's the sender, and in this case, he's using a text, and the receiver is going to look at receiving it. So she's going to decode. So the chap, hopefully this works, annotate, bear with me a second, spotlight. And, there we go. So this chap here, he's putting a message together, so he's encoding it, so he's taking it out of his head, he's putting it into text, and he is sending it across to this young lady, and she's hopefully going to read it and decode it the same way as he intended. Now, the problem along the way is that there's noise, and we'll talk about noise in quite some detail a little later on. And there's noise on his part, there's noise on her part, and there's a few barriers, and we'll discuss barriers at some length because it's quite important. And then there's also the channel, the mechanism by which the sender transmits the message to the receiver. And then hopefully, if the message is received in the right way, there will be some feedback, and that feedback may be something along the lines of the sender, let's just call him Joe, sent a message to Mary saying, join me for lunch, and Mary says, that would be great, what time? Yeah, and you can see how the loop goes on from there. So it's quite crucial that we understand that pretty much all of our communication is based on this model. Now, what does happen from time to time is when we look at the receiver, this could sometimes be one-to-one, or it could be one-to-few, yeah, or it could be one-to-many, like on this particular call. And sometimes there's interaction where we're looking for feedback during the course of the communication. We're looking for feedback at the end, which is hopefully what we'll have here. Or we'll look for no feedback whatsoever, and that's like going to a big presentation at a trade show or something like that. But this model works. It doesn't matter whether you're talking about dad talking to kids, mom and dad talking, lecturer, student, celebrity, audience. So just bear that in mind. So in terms of us communicating effectively, there's really three basic components here. One is verbal messages, so the kind of thing that we talk about. There's paraverbal, and it's how we say the things, so how is really important. And I've had my kids go, but Dad, you must have been shouting at me because it's how you said it, you know. And I go, well, I wasn't, okay? So how you say things is crucially important to being understood the right way. And then there's non-verbal messages, which is our body language, tonality, and a couple other things. But we use these three things to make sure that our messages are clear and concise, and to make sure that they are received and correctly understood when we speak them out or write them down. And that's true. It doesn't matter what language you speak. This is true for all. Now, if we look very quickly at us, we're going to talk specifically here about transmitting or sending of messages. We need to make sure that they are brief, succinct, and organized. So we're not going to be just jumping around all the time in terms of our discussion, but we want to be kind of systematic in our approach. We need to be jargon-free. Now, what do I mean by that? I've been in business a long time. And I've met a lot of people in my life. I ran a networking group for about 11, 12 years, met bucket loads of people. And it's interesting, when you meet somebody who's passionate about their work or their life or something along those, something that really gets to they really enjoy, you will find that they start chucking in words which have no meaning to you. You go, oh, I'm sorry, what does that mean? You know, as an example, my son likes to play on Fortnite, okay? Now, there's a whole new language. They speak English, and I have no idea what they're talking about, right? Because it's full of jargon. So it's very difficult for an outsider to become part of that conversation. And also, the other reason for being clear on what you're trying to do here is that you don't create resistance in the person listening or the person that's receiving the message, which is quite common in our world today. And just while we're here, I thought I'd just pop up a couple of things. So when we talk about verbal communication, it's about the spoken word. It's about how we do that. Now, we don't always do that face to face. We could do it like we're doing it here on a Zoom chat. We could do it over the telephone. We could do it on television, as it says here. You know, there's many different ways of doing it. But your pitch, volume, speed, clarity, all of those things count, okay? Now, what's useful about verbal communication is you get instant feedback, okay? But if you're doing it online like this right now, I assume you're all listening. I assume you're all attentive. I assume you're all excited and juiced with everything that I'm saying and hanging on my every word, right? But there's no feedback, okay? I can't see that. Whereas if we were doing this in person, I could judge very quickly whether I needed to change my tone of voice, slow down, speed up, ask for clarification from a person or persons in the audience. So there are some advantages and disadvantages, yeah, but nothing beats in person. If it's written, yeah, then our feedback actually takes a little bit longer, even if we do it via email. You know, it takes some time because you think about it, you write it down, you may edit it, and then you send it, right? Whether that's an email, a letter, anything like that. And then you have to wait. And then the person's going to read it with all the noise coming at them. Yeah, like right now, you're busy listening to this, but the world's happening around you. There's sounds in your home or wherever you are. There's people walking past you. The light is changing because the clouds move across the sun. So there's many, many distractions. So they don't always focus intently on the communication that you sent, and thereby you have the possibility of misunderstanding coming in. So it's important to check people's understanding. Then we move on to non-verbal cues or non-verbal messaging. So as you can see from the picture here, facial expressions, and we have hundreds of them, yeah, every person has them. You know, I can go, oh, that's really interesting. Not so sure. Cross, yeah, happy, yay, yeah. There's all these things. And they give you a way of interpreting what I, okay? And we have this word, if you want to make a note of this, it's called congruence. And it's to make sure that people, what they say lines up with what they say physically. And I go, I think you are a nice person. Yeah, my face is all crunched up and yeah, really cross and angry. Yeah, and I'm telling you, you're a nice person. Are you likely to believe me? Probably not. Yeah, or you've heard of body language, which is around postures and gestures, and we have to be careful with gestures. The gestures are movements of hands and things, and culture comes into play here because gestures in one culture are very different to the gesture in another culture. And we have to be mindful of that when we are transmitting. I trust that this is making sense. If it is, just give me a thumbs up. That would be great. Come on. Okay. So moving on. There we go. So if we look at the importance of nonverbal communication, so for some of you might have seen this before, but this is really important. The words or the literal meaning that we use only covers about 7% of the overall message that we're trying to transmit or convey to someone. how we say it, so our tone of voice, whether we have intonations. I'm sure some of you have been in lectures where the lecturer speaks all at the same tone of voice, and then you wake up at the end of the lesson going, gee, what was that all about? Yeah. So you've got to have some up and down in your voice and be all over the show. Yeah. And then there's body language. And body language accounts for about 55% of the overall transmission of your message. So as you can see from this, if you're talking on the telephone, you are using words and tone of voice, right? But there's no body language. If you're doing video and it's one-to-one, or like I'm doing here, then you can see I'm using much more of the communication spectrum, right? But if you're just sending a text or an email or a WhatsApp, guess what? 7%, that's all you're using. And it's down to the literal meaning of the words. And I see from some of the people on the call that English is probably, I'm making a guess here, so I do apologize up front, but I guess that some of you, English is not your first language. So what you are doing is you are translating into English from the language that you have in your, that you've been brought up in. You're translating it and you're giving it literal meaning. So they're slightly different to maybe somebody who's a local speaker. Now, whether I'm from South Africa, I speak Afrikaans and Zulu, but when I was learning those languages, I used to think in English and then translate and then speak the language. And then the more I did that, then eventually I get to the place where I can actually think in the language and then I converse. That just changes everything. And I'm sure some of you experience that. But just remember, non-verbal is massive, okay? Because it touches 93% of all your communication. So if you're just sending a text or a letter, you've got to somehow put tone into the letter. That's what they mean by putting tone, right? So I hope this helps. Then we move on, you know, what are the things here? And there are so many things. This is a massive subject. We could talk about body language for 2 days. You know, facial expressions, tone of voice. You know, if you're doing seminars, which I've done a number of, you know, you've got to get up on stage and you have to be enthusing. You have to be deliberate. You have to make a point, and you use your voice to do that. And your body, because it is important that you understand these things. See what I've just done? So if we're looking at some of the non-verbal communications, it breaks down into 3 elements. And the first one is appearance. So what do you look like? Yeah. So today I'm not wearing a t-shirt. I'm actually wearing a collared shirt for a change. COVID's allowed me to dispense with ties. It's wonderful. Body language, facial expressions, gestures, postures, all that kind of stuff. And then tone of voice. So it's about how fast you speak, whether you're comfortable, soft, quiet, loud, and how fast you speak. And in some cultures, the language is really, really fast, and in other cultures, they speak a lot slower. Yeah? And you need to take all these things into consideration when you are communicating with a person. And then we have this thing called paraverbal. So what we mean by that is the emphasis you place on things. So it's what meaning are you going to put to something? So I've got 3 terms here, and I'll use the first one. So I didn't say you were stupid versus I didn't say you were stupid. I didn't say you were stupid. You see the meaning? Same sentence. There's 3 sentences there. Same sentence. But because I put the emphasis on different words, meaning has changed. I hope you get this. And this is the difficulty in communication. So we need to be really astute when we creating communications, whether they be written. You know, people put it in bold. A funny story. My father in South Africa, I bought him a smartphone, and one day my son was looking at one of the messages received from Grandpa, and he said, "Dad, gee, Grandpa's always cross all the time." So I went, "What do you mean?" And he says to me, he says, "Dad, everything's in capitals. I laughed and I said, oh no, that's just because Granddad hasn't actually figured out that how to do uppercase and lowercase, which was really funny because he had interpreted it one way and I'd interpreted it another way. So just an example of how things can be misconstrued so quickly. So just a little something, and this was something I thought I would throw in because I thought it was interesting. We spend a lot of time talking about communication and transmitting, but a lot of our communication is listening, okay? And there was a study done some time ago, the references are here. But what you find is in terms of our time spent communicating, in other words, us talking and communicating, not reading, yeah, we spend, our time is spent listening. 45% of our time in the communication time is actually listening. 9% writing, 16% reading, and 30% speaking. That's quite a lot. And what's really interesting about it is when you look at this, you'll find that when people are taught, yeah, so think of your schooling. You were taught to speak first, yeah, by mom and dad and however you were brought up. Then you went to school and then you started to learn to read. And once you were getting comfortable with reading, you then moved on to writing, yeah? And the curriculum was actually then done all around reading and writing, yeah? So the amount of time spent on reading and writing decreases, and very little is spent on teaching people on how to listen. And listening is a crucial aspect of communication. And so true that it affects marketing, and I've seen a lot of rubbish marketing because people do not listen to their market. We have misunderstandings. Why? Because people don't listen. So what can we do about it? Well, listening requires concentration. In other words, you have to give somebody your attention, 100% of your attention. We talk about mobile phones, right? In my house, as an example, when we have dinner around the table, nobody brings a phone. Why? Real simple. It means everybody is 100% present. If you go to a meeting and people have their mobile phones on the desk or on the table, I always ask them, I say, do we need our phones? Is anybody expecting anything important? And then they all seem to put them away because it ends up being a distraction. Yeah. And also remember, listening is also showing the other person, the person speaking or the person communicating or transmitting, that there's a desire on your part that shows interest, yeah, and that you want to learn or see what they think. You don't have to agree with everything here, but what you have to do in terms of that listening is you need to put your judgments away and your evaluations away until the end. Yeah, it's so we live in a world where we judge so quickly, but we never. So the minute you judge, what you do is you preclude or you stop any other input coming in because you've already blocked it off. And maybe in the next sentence that the clarity will come, but you've already blocked it off because you've judged. So be careful here, guys. So non-verbal is we give people our physical attention. So if we were sitting there and you're busy staring into space while I'm talking, or tell me if I'm listening to you right now, you know, do you have my undivided attention? For those that can't see, I have my phone held to my ear. And it looks like I'm giving you all my attention, doesn't it? No. It means distraction. So you get the point here. So there's a lot of non-verbal cues that you as the listener give to the speaker. And then there's the verbal attention where we talk about, oh, that's interesting. Oh, okay, cool. I get that. Understanding, a little bit of feedback, yeah? But two people in an audience talking to each other while a person is talking, let's say a lecturer, for example, that may be for understanding, but it may also be rude. So depending on what's being discussed will determine whether that is rude or just asking for clarification. Yeah. And it happens quite a lot, especially when people have come from different languages. So somebody, so how do you become an active listener? Okay, so I want you to understand this bit. It's called active listening, and this is the point at which you actually go, oh yeah, I'm really listening, right? Is somebody says something, so I say, well, active listening is really important because, yeah? You go, oh, okay, Ivan, so just so as I understand, active listening is important because, and then I'm going to go yes or agree with you. Yeah, what you are doing is you are taking the message that has been received, yeah, from Joe. You're taking it, you are processing it in here, and your process of processing it, you are speaking it out, so you're giving it meaning. And then it means Joe can actually look at what you've said and say, yeah, that's correct. And you've done this many times without thinking about it. You've done it at school, you've done it at home. Yeah, you've done it when you go out. The other thing is to summarize points and go, oh, okay. So Ivan, what you're saying is that summarizing, paraphrasing, and questioning are really important. I go, yes. Yeah, that shows you've been listening. And then the other thing that people can do to be an active listener is question. Say, gee, I don't quite think I agree with that. Can you explain how that works? What did you mean by that? Yeah, because then that shows that you were actually listening, and thereby you have connection. So we've spoken about the transmitting and the receiving, and about listening and about speaking, yeah? But we have barriers, okay? And unfortunately, we live in a world of distractions, and there are many, many barriers. There are barriers in terms of putting the message together. So as we can see here, you know, lack of sensitivity, that's down to personality profiles. Again, that's a huge subject, but you have some people who are very short in how they say things, and then you have some people who are really sensitive or like things explained in a nice flowery way. If you put the two together, there's a potential for people to bump heads here. The other thing is, you know, you get two people from two different cultures trying to communicate. Yeah, they may smile, they may bump heads a little bit, yeah, but their communication is always going to be a miss until they find some common ground, and then they can communicate. And you can all read the slide, it's quite straightforward, but you know, the emotional intelligence is absolutely crucial here, and there's numerous books written on the subject. Then we have, in terms of transmitting, you know, we have barriers in the transmission of our message. You know, there's physical distractions, I've already mentioned the phone, time, yeah, if you're doing emails, video when there's a distraction in the room around the person, you know, so there's third-party distractions. Or you may recall there's a game, I forget what it's called now, where you have people sitting in a circle, and one person whispers a message, a standard message. So you write it out, give it to the first person, and then they have to say it to the person sitting on their left. And then that person doesn't take the piece of paper, but they have to repeat the message to the next person on their left, and then so on and so on and so on until it comes back around to the person to the right of the person who originally sent the message. And you'll find that the message is very different to what was transmitted. Why? Because it gets lost in the passing of the message chain. The other thing is decoding. You know, I can spend hours, and I have done this in the past, where I've put long or big quotations together, you know, or outlines of work, scope of works and things like that to customers, and they're just not interested. You know, they they look at it and they go, oh, that's me, I'm done, thank you very much. And so they're not concentrating on what I've put in front of them, or they've lost interest. And it does happen that people lose interest. And sadly, we live in a world today where, the bottom two here on decoding barriers are massive. We have an information overload deluxe. Yeah, Google has added to that. You can go find anything and you'll find 100 opposing ideas or directions on a particular topic. And that just leads on to the second one, which is conflicting messages, which is huge. And, conflicting messages place a lot of stress on a person, and then the feedback tends to be very short. And, part of the challenge also is in responding. So we have to be able to respond. Yeah, so we've got a message, we've got through all the barriers, it's been decoded. Now, is there a way to get it back? Is there a way to get it back? If we look at something like banking, for example, try to speak to a person today when you have a problem. Yeah, it's very difficult to get feedback or give feedback. Yeah, it can lead to a lot of frustration. So huge area, a massive topic with many areas. So if somebody's sitting in jail, for example, you have a physical barrier. So we can sometimes have physical barriers. There's many different types. A door could be one. We have perceptual barriers, so how people perceive each other. So as you can see from the picture of the man and woman there, they're probably cozy and looking to kiss each other. So they have this dreamy look, yeah? But on the other hand, you might have somebody who's walking around with a whole bunch of fear, guilt, and worry, yeah? How we would speak to these people would be very different. So let's just check here on the chat. Maybe, let's see, okay. Then we have emotional barriers. Yeah, so as you can see from the pictures here, there are many different barriers that we face. So if you look at the picture above, the girl's upset with the guy. If you look at the picture below, this one here, you'll find that the young lady's clearly disinterested, or maybe she's got some bad news, who knows. We have cultural barriers, a big one. When I was in the corporate world, I ran a large marketing team for Sub-Saharan Africa. We had many different cultures. And I can tell you now, we got it wrong on occasion, big time. Why? One, we didn't understand the culture. So, for example, I was brought up in a world where the guy opens the door for the girl to go through. That's just good manners. In a lot of African cultures, the guy goes through first and then the woman follows. Why? He's protecting her, making sure it's clear for her. But if you don't understand those two things, you can see it as being rude, for example. And do you think that would cloud your communication from that point on? And the answer is yes. In terms of emotional barriers, coming back to that as a question, if somebody, so if we take the top one, yeah, girl, guy. So again, we always have to put these things in context, okay? So girls just had some bad news. Her friend is, I don't know, something happened to her friend, and she's more worried about her friend, but she feels she needs to be here. Or, for example, she's just found out her boyfriend was cheating on her. How do you think the communication is going to go? Yeah. So you got to look if somebody's down, so somebody's feeling, and you come along as Mr. Joy in a bucket, right? Like full of the joys of spring. You have a disconnect. So you haven't actually connected with each other. Yeah. It's called being in rapport, a huge subject area. So a good doctor normally has good rapport with his patients. That means they know, like, and trust him, and that's what we talk about when we mean rapport. through here. I don't want to get stuck. And of course, we have language barriers. Yeah, we've spoken about that, and I'm sure you've all had experience of that. How people, the language that they speak, but also where they come from, and that type of thing. And then also we have gender barriers, so that people treat girls and boys in different ways, and we live in a far more complex world today. So that's even multiplied now. So you just need to be conscious of all of these things. And then, of course, we have interpersonal barriers. So I have a friend who speaks really loud, and I just, you know, when I hear him coming, I just go, oh, I don't want to listen to you. Please go away. Yeah. Do you think that's going to help to our standard communication? Answer is no. Yeah. So just be mindful of these things and actually use them to your advantage. So overcoming the barriers of effective communication, you know, it's about body language, it's about being simple, it's about being sensitive to culture, and it's about seeking participation. Yeah, very difficult to do on a call like this with the technology, much easier to do in person. But using the chat and the thumbs up and all that kind of stuff, that helps. Yeah. And then learning to question properly. You know, there are so many books out there about how to question, how to use questions in an engaging way, because you agree that you can use questions to challenge. So this is just some ideas as to what you can do here. And just remember, you know, Mark Twain put it so nicely. He said, you know, if we were supposed to talk more than listen, we would have been given 2 mouths and 1 ear. I always like that one. That means we should listen twice as much as we speak. So just some tools is just remember, there's a message, you've got to encode it so the message comes out of your head. You want to get it across to somebody, you put it into something, you send it, they decode it, and they will interpret it a certain way, and then they will actually give you some kind of feedback. And it's always good to ask for feedback. You know, I have clients and they say, yeah, but you know, I sent an email, I didn't get a reply. I said, well, did you ask them to reply? No. So I said, okay. So if we let's say we say, please reply by Friday this week. Yeah. If you get to Friday this week and you haven't got a reply, then you need to follow them up. Why? It might have got stuck. You know, one of the barriers to written communication today is spam filters. I have no control over spam filters. You know, one day I send a message, it doesn't go into somebody's spam box. Tomorrow, I send it, ends up in somebody's spam box. How much control have I got over that? Zero. So you've got to put mechanisms in place to allow for feedback. Yeah. And here's a couple of things that you can do to improve your effective communications. So very quickly, whirlwind tour. We're probably going to go over by about 5 minutes. That's okay with everyone. But I want to talk about very quickly about negotiation and give you some tools here. So one is the world is a stage for negotiation. That's important. Our ability to negotiate has been around since we've been born. Yeah, you might remember when you wanted to buy some toys and your mom said no, or your dad. Yeah, what did you do next? So what did you do? Yeah. I'm sure, so I can see many of you smiling at this point. Because what you did is you cried until you got the toy. Yeah. Not always successfully. There were some times when you got something else other than the toy. But our lives are filled with negotiation, and being able to negotiate is kind of key for us. We use it with our business partners. We use it with our bosses. We use it with our workmates. We use it with our partners, and we use it in business all the time. And it's a give and take decision-making process that involves 2 or more persons who want something different, right? So just very quickly while we're here, could you put in for me what you think a reasonable definition of negotiation is in a simple sentence? I'll give you a minute. Excuse me. So if you could pop it in the chat box, that would be great. Okay. Gardner, come up, coming to a mutual agreement, great. A discussion aimed at reaching agreement, this is good. Okay, that would benefit both parties, interesting. Benefiting both parties, exchanging words and ideas, okay. Anybody else? Okay. Discussion with the outcome such as an agreement. Okay, cool. Thank you, Jan. Discussion with name to conclude. Okay. Okay, brilliant. Okay, strategic discussion. Interesting word, strategic discussion, which is good, and resolves an issue in a way that both parties accept. Yeah, these are all really good. So you're kind of in the right place. Oops. So for me, I came up with a definition. Negotiation is a process centered on a discussion that is intended to produce an agreement, and then that agreement, an action, a corresponding action. Yeah. So all very good. But in negotiation, we have to use many things. Yeah, we have to be able to communicate. We need to be able to listen. We need to understand marketing, psychology. We need to be assertive. We need to handle conflict. Yeah, because a lot of negotiations are normally because two people can't agree. Yeah, so how do you negotiate your way out of that? So there's many different aspects to just this one thing of negotiation. So what we do here is, so why do we negotiate? Well, we negotiate on many different levels. One is because we want to buy or sell something to someone, yeah? So we have a conversation around that. Or we negotiate in order to solve a problem. So if I did this, do you think we could do that? Somebody else would come in and say, no, we can't do that because you can't put diesel in a petrol car. And you go, oh, okay, great. So what about putting electricity in? Oh, okay, yeah, cool. And then suddenly we have some agreement, yeah? And the whole point of this is always to reach an agreement and then do something about that agreement, yeah? Because negotiation is the process from the problem up to agreement, yeah? There's a whole bit after that, it's called action. So to define this, we need to remember that you need a minimum of 2 people in order to negotiate, yeah? They've got to have some predetermined goals. You probably walk in expecting an outcome, and they probably walk in expecting a different outcome, okay? And what you need to do is find some, you've got to define how you're going to resolve this and how you're going to come to a consensus. And what is really crucial here in negotiations is that both parties are willing to modify their positions. If one is, you are on a win-lose here. It's not going to work. So you've got to get to the place or get them to move. Yeah, they must be able to move their position. And sometimes you do that. We see that a lot in politicking, you know, where they strong arm people to get them to move. Yeah? But parties need to understand that the purpose of negotiation is coming to agreement. So there is a process that you can follow. And again, you know, there's many different ways of doing this. I picked something really simple, and hopefully this will be a benefit to you. So just remember, negotiation is a process, yeah. And if you deal with it step by step in your thinking, then you'll probably be successful at it. And there are a number of books on the subject, and I've at the end I have a couple of recommendations for you to read if you want to take this further. It's something I would encourage you all to do. So, negotiation. How do you go about negotiating? Well, it's quite simple. There's always step 1, which is preparation. Preparation is the key to victory every time, right? So even before you decide to negotiate, you need to decide that there needs to be a decision made. 2, when and where. And 3, who's going to come. And important, always limit timescale. Say we need to have this resolved by next week. We need to have this resolved by 2 o'clock. We need to have this resolved by Friday afternoon. Yeah? Because what that does is actually gets people to the point of decision. And it's just a technique, but it stops disagreement carrying on and on and on and on. And I have loads of stories where I've been involved in things like this, where the thing carried on and on and on until you put a stake in the ground and you say, no more, we're done. If we get here and we haven't agreed anything, I'm walking away from the deal, or whatever the case is. Yeah. 2, there's going to be a discussion. Yeah. And this is where you have to learn something. In communication, one of the biggest things that they do not teach people is when to keep quiet. Would you agree right now is not a good time to keep quiet? Because many of you are going, gee, what happened? Is the internet stopped or something like that? But what we have to remember here, guys, is, in a second. So I was disappearing into. So silence is really important, right? And you can use silence quite effectively. There's a number of books on the subject. You know, as an example, when I'm negotiating or making a sales call, we would talk backwards and forwards in this discussion phase, but I would use silence and say, so do you think this is something you would like to go ahead with? And at that point, I keep quiet, because the next person I want to speak is them. And you use this silence technique all the time. And it is sometimes important in negotiation just to shush and let the other party talk and talk and talk. And you use active listening. You go, okay, great, what else? So that you can try to put yourself in their shoes so you can see it how they see it. Yeah. And vice versa, you would expect the same. Make sure you have clear goals, yeah? So from the discussion, you have some goals and interests and perspectives, and you need to clarify some stuff. Now, what we're doing here is we're taking a process, and some of these things you can do in a very quick, you could probably do it in a sentence, yeah? It all depends what the negotiation is about. But a kid wanting a toy to a kid having a toy, they go through this whole process quite quickly. Okay. Make sure the outcome's win-win. Yeah. So always try to strive for win-win on both sides, because then they both feel like you've gained something. So if it's girlfriend, boyfriend, you need to figure out what's win-win for you. If it's two businesses trying to come to a deal about an outstanding debt, make sure both parties are happy with that. Yeah. Then once you've done it, you need to, you now have an agreement, yeah? Make sure that both sides actually understand the thing, the agreement as it is. And then more importantly, write down an agreement or implement that agreement quite quickly. So if we go back to the child with the toy, yeah, here's your toy, be a good boy, yeah? That's agreement, and the actions are following that. So that was a real quick whistle stop on negotiation. We do this all the time, but the important thing here is be prepared, talk about it, set some clear goals, always aim for win-win, get agreement. Once you've got agreement, do something with it. That's it, it's real simple. And just one thing that you need to remember when you are negotiating is know when to walk away, know when it's time out, I'm done, and leave. You can always come back and start again with preparation, discussion, clear, setting clear goals and so forth. So just to summarize, what effective skills do you actually require if you want to be a negotiator? And we are all negotiators, guys, every single one of us. So top skills you can get, you know, and there's books on every single one of these subjects. Decision making, how to make decisions, yeah, active listening, we've spoken about, interpersonal skills, yeah, how do you build rapport, how do you solve problems, how do you be ethical, all of those things, they're all important, not just as a communicator, but as a negotiator. So just something else that is kind of really important is there's three parts. There's the negotiating phase, there's the influencing phase, and there's the persuading phase. And you know, you really need to be careful here that when you negotiate, you've got to do some persuading, you've got to influence to a degree, and then you have to negotiate your way out. Oops. Sorry. So what's important here is just to finish up. We're coming into land, as they say. So it's important that you understand what persuading is and how you are good at it, how you can influence somebody's decision, and when you can't do either of those, how can you negotiate, get the other party to move. So I take it you're all familiar with Aristotle. And Aristotle had this model of the world where he talked about ethos, pathos, and logos. And I put it on the left-hand side here to talk about, you know, we have credibility, logic, and emotion. Okay, we all agree that in communicating, emotion is important. If we can convey a story that has an emotive aspect to it, people always like us. They go, wow, that's awesome, this guy is so amazing, yeah. Or somebody that's flat with no emotion, we normally don't remember them. Credibility, you know, kind of a key aspect here. And then using logic and figures and stuff like that is also crucial. So preparation deals with logic, delivery deals with emotion, credibility is about self-belief and confidence. So I hope this helps. So just something to mention that in negotiation, it is a stairway. It's about using emotional intelligence. There's a lot of subject matter on this. It's about reaching out. It's about being in rapport, so being empathetic. It doesn't mean you agree with them, but you're in rapport. You go, oh, that's interesting, I really care for you. So the key words for rapport is that you are in harmony with one another. Because if you have that, then you have trust. They don't have to agree to trust, okay? And once you are there, then you can influence and persuade. And these all require listening. That's crucial. I hope I've made that point here, because listening is super, super important. And as Dale Carnegie said in a book, which I highly recommend to every single person I meet, and that includes you lot, is How to Win Friends and Influence People. He summarized it in some very simple principles to be a good transmitter, but also a good listener. And that is, don't criticize, do a lot of praise, smile often, remember the importance of a name. Names are important. People have heard them over and over. So when you say, hi, Junaid, how are you doing? Then people will go, wow, they're talking to me, and they feel like it's somebody. Be a good listener. Every one of you, I'm sure, has a friend who you could pretty much name right now who's a good listener. Yeah. Why? What makes them a good listener? Because there's a role model for you. Okay. You can all read what's here. And then the other thing not to say to people is you're wrong. They can be misguided. They may misunderstand something. But if you make somebody wrong, they will normally defend their position. Okay? So you save yourself a lot of hassles if you do it by finding another word to use. So that brings us to an end.